Clay, before we get into the first two episodes of this second season of Star Trek Lower Decks, I had to ask you, do you believe in the sophomore slump in a general sense across any kind of media or activity or whatever you can do? The sophomore slump is usually known as your second year of something. Sophomore is when you're second year of something. So your second attempt is always a bit of a letdown compared to the first one. Do you think that's a general thing, something to worry about?
Kind of. I think it depends on. I guess it depends on how high you fly with the first one. You know, like if you, like I heard Peter Frampton talk about this actually, where he said, Frampton Comes Alive came out and it was the greatest thing ever, and people are giving it away in the mail with samples of Tide and all that kind of jokes and stuff. And he was like, yeah, then I had to go back and they wanted the next album like within a year. And I had spent my whole life writing those songs. And then they want me to do another album in 8 months, and it's just not going to be as good. So I think there's that kind of thing where it's like, I think a lot of times the time and the pressure gets to people and stuff. But on the other hand, though, you've got a band like Led Zeppelin or something that's constantly writing and constantly recording, and arguably their second album is better than the first, and the fourth album is better than the third. So I do think I think it shows up more when the first one flies higher, and so the second one, even if it's good, is never going to seem like it's as good as the first one. Yeah.
I think it probably happens in music more than anything. I don't think it happens too much in TV series, really. It always seems like TV's second year is generally better than its first year, but I think there's a lot of stories of a band's second album is because they're under pressure to get something out. It's the songs that weren't good enough to make the first album, so they have like a collection of songs that are not really the top material, but they've already written 5 of them, so they might as well use them for this next album that's got to come out. Which is gonna knock your average down, I think. Is there a more famous? I'm gonna say famous just because everybody makes this comment, whether or not it's true or not. Television sophomore slump than say The Wire. I don't even think The Wire's a sophomore. Yeah, I mean,
because that's the one everyone's like, season 2 is not great.
That would be my example, but I don't agree with it, I guess. Is there a better version of a sophomore slump in the second year?
True Detective's a pretty good one, actually.
True Detective's a good one. Yeah. I didn't like the first year, but the second year was something else. Anything else? No, like even the Star Treks generally get better. I think comedies are always better in their second year. Maybe spoiling ourselves for this discussion, but I don't know.
A lot of TV I think TV tends to be better because the first year, so much of it is figuring out what the show is.
Yeah.
And then by the second year, you've got everybody kind of gelling, and the crew is kind of, all working on the same page and stuff, et cetera.
I think the music example would be bands that started off as punk bands in like 76, 77, and then they became post-punk with their next album. There was a kind of like, they were literally like learning their instruments in the first album, and then the second one is actually an improvement because there's a kind of musicality growth that comes out of it. I think TV's the same. It's like you figure out what you're doing and then you go with it. But let's get into Lower Decks, I guess, and see how it manages to avoid or fall into its sophomore slump. We're not doing breaks anymore. I'm done with breaks, so let's just move right into it. We're going to be talking about strange energies.
Efficiency. Nothing but streamlined efficiency. No gristle whatsoever. No taste. We just want lean hamburger here.
Let's just give our scores and get the hell out of here.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been listening to Wire a lot, and Wire is a band that embraces brutal efficiency in songwriting. So I think I'm gonna adopt it here. If people have a big problem, let me know. But I'm just gonna continue as if nothing ever happened. So, Strange Energies is the first episode of the second season of Star Trek Lower Decks. It came out on August 12th, 2021. Written by Mike McMahon, directed by Jason Zurich, in-universe date not specifically known as 2183. In this episode called Strange Energies, the USS Cerritos is dispatched on a mission where it ends up in a sci-fi event resulting in strange energy, which Commander Ransom inadvertently absorbs. The second episode, we're going to be talking about 2 episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks in each of these episodes for the second season. The second one's called Kayshon His Eyes Open. Second episode of the second season came out August 19th, 2021. Written by Chris Kula, directed by Kim Arndt, in Universe Date 58001.2, 2381. In this episode, our lower deckers have trouble bonding with Ensign Jet Manhaver, who has been assigned Boimler's bunk and shift duties. Meanwhile, we get a glimpse of Boimler's life on the USS Titan, which is more intense than we thought it would be. I don't like that blurb. I think it's a bad blurb. But I'm excited to learn that guy's name was Jet Manhaver.
Yeah.
So
it
Clay,
doesn't really. I guess it kind of fits. I guess it fits the way they introduce him, but. And you learn that he's more than just the good-looking Ransom type, I guess.
Yeah. I guess it could be Manhaver, but I think Manhaver sounds a little bit more natural. I don't remember them saying his name in the episode. Anyway, as I said, we're going to be doing 2 episodes of Lower Decks for the rest of the season. I think it's more efficient. We're going to be alternating Enterprise and Lower Decks each week. So next week will be Enterprise. The week after that, Lower Decks, until Lower Decks is done. Mostly because I think that Lower Decks might not have enough to carry each episode of itself, and I want to finish Enterprise too. So I think it's in our interest to just keep Enterprise going. Lower Decks, we can do 2 at 1 and call it a day. And we'll start here with these 2. We don't have to talk about these in order, Clay, but general sense, what'd you think of these 2? Do they have a sophomore slump so far?
I don't think so. I like them both pretty decently well. I think I like the second one a bit more.
I thought the second one was much better. Much better, in my opinion.
I think they're pretty consistent stylistically from the last one. What I didn't like about the first one is it kind of felt a little bit like it was a hangover episode from the first season. As far as just kind of getting back into the Mariner and her mom stuff, which I didn't really feel landed that well in this one. And I also actually,
you mean like a reintroduction hangover, like they had to bring you up to speed with where everyone stood at that point?
Yeah,
that the storyline was just over at the end of the first season.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that they focused on it so specifically, and then they very quickly reverted it back to the original version where they weren't working together anymore. Which I for some reason I had thought they had landed at that point anyway at the end of the last season. I couldn't remember exactly where things landed. And at the end of this episode, I was kind of confused because I wasn't really sure what Mariner did to end up in the brig. Because she was given the okay to go down there and power wash the building by her mom. And I'm not really sure what would send her to the brig aside from repeatedly kicking Ransom into the nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. I guess it was disobeying orders, right? Is that the problem with?
I guess. I'm not really sure what orders were going around when there was a giant head trying to eat the ship, but sure, whatever. Doesn't matter.
I didn't really like the first one all that much. I thought that the second one was better. My problem with the first one is Strange Energies is that it was interesting because its conception is incredibly generic Star Trek. Like the point of the episode is that they encounter strange energy, which gives you sort of like this godlike ability. Yeah. And it's very much like on the nose, making fun of the fact that real Star Trek shows, quote unquote real Star Trek shows, run into weird energy things that do stuff like this, right? And to me, it just felt kind of trite and uninteresting. It was almost like too much of a reference point to what the joke is that they're making fun of something, like because they're calling it out in the episode as how sort of bland and how this happens all the time. And I just didn't feel that like the comedy that came out of it felt like it was specific enough to be funny. In that case, it was kind of like, yeah, I get the idea, but I don't think this is really all that good. And I also didn't like all the endless referencing of Mariner and her mother. I was kind of glad that they reset that at the end, but it felt to me like it was a lot of, remember season 1, this is all the stuff we need to catch you up on, and here's a generic plot line going on in the background that will kill a little bit of time in between us reminding you of things.
Yeah, I think that's what was bothering me about it too. Like that's why it felt like it felt like it was a hangover episode from season 1. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't love the main thing I think that was bothering me was that it wasn't really like the main crux of it with Ransom getting those powers and trying to eat the ship, and when they eventually break through to him and figure out what his issue is, it didn't feel like that was the point of the episode before that. The fact that he was annoyed with Mariner and the captain hanging out together or whatever. And
yeah, jealous of them a little bit. It's sort of a jealousy thing.
Yeah. They didn't really get that. Didn't really come across that was what the problem was. Like they didn't spend any time laying the groundwork for that with Ransom in this episode. It was more of the mom stuff. And so I think those two things kind of like were kind of in balance, where I didn't think the payoff with Ransom matched how much weight they put on that story or how much groundwork they laid for it at the beginning. And I also didn't think that the amount of groundwork they laid with the Mariner and her mother story really paid off either. So I think they kind of sent each other in flux a little bit. That being said, her depowering him by kicking him in the balls, I legitimately laughed out loud. I am not above saying that I found that very funny.
It's a little bit of a Family Guy thing there, where they keep doing it after it's revealed that that's what's depowered him, is that she keeps kicking him and stuff like that. I like that too, and I thought that was funny. Like I don't know. I don't know how much my opinion of the show's humor has really changed since the first season. Yeah. But what I think I'm always going to have a hard time with this show not feeling like it's a sort of too big for its britches version of a web series. You know, like how shows used to have like web series that went along with it.
Yeah,
you kind of like tune in for a little side taste of something that's not really real, but it'll get you to watch 5 minutes of advertising as you go online to watch a show or whatever.
Right.
It kind of feels like that to me. Like I don't know in my heart of hearts if I'm ever going to accept the Lower Decks as like, if people, catch me on the street and just say, I'm on Jeopardy or something, and say, list all the Star Trek shows. Lower Decks will probably be the one that comes in last, and I have to think about what I'm missing while it's going on. It's like that kind of a Star Trek series.
You're gonna remember Star Trek Prodigy, but not Lower Decks.
Probably just because of the Chakotay and Janeway, will they, won't they thing coming back over again. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We had this kind of discussion about whether or not this is canon, and I don't really care if it's canon or not. It's more about the fact of like the importance that I put on this series and where I think things matter. And I think the humor kind of comes from that. The other downside to that, and I'll throw it to you, is that when you were talking about the Ransom storyline not having groundwork laid, and the same with the Mariner and her mother groundwork being laid, I think technically my biggest problem with this show is that I don't really like or relate to the characters so far in this. I feel the characters in the show are a means to an end in making a joke. And when you compare something similar, which is kind of another joke-a-minute show like Arrested Development, I have a real sense, even in the first couple episodes of Arrested Development, I have a real sense of what those characters are. And they kind of, even as exaggerated as that show was, they felt like real people somehow. Like they felt like they were actually in relationships with each other, and they were really well developed in how they would interact with each other. I feel that the Lower Decks characters aren't that. They feel very hollow to me, and the comedy is kind of coming off of this Star Trek let's make a joke thing. But like the other storyline in the Strange Energy is Tendi and Rutherford, and I didn't care at all about Tendi and Rutherford's interpersonal conflict. Like it just washed over me, and I was like, and I don't care because I don't really feel that they're full characters at this point. Like even Arrested Development, to bring it back to that, when the characters had a fake sort of like heartwarming moment that the show would then pull the carpet out from under them, I actually felt that there was a heartwarming thing in those Arrested Development moments. You feel that the family is actually learning a lesson, and then there's a joke and it all kind of falls apart. I don't feel that for the Lower Decks characters, and I wonder if I'm ever going to really love the show if I never feel anything more than that for these guys.
Yeah, yeah. I liked the Tendi and Rutherford stuff a little bit more, I think, storyline wise. But even there, it was like there was so little of it, and it was kind of, like you're saying, was kind of a means to an end. So I do think there's not enough time, I don't think, to really. But even that kind of felt like a hangover last season too, because it's like they kind of had a thing a little bit, and I even found that plot confusing because the way that Rutherford was talking about everything was confusing me. Where he's like, "Yeah, this is our first date. No, it's our third date, but my mind is my chip is something, and I'm different now." And I was like, I don't
remember this.
Yeah, is this stuff that happened, or I'm just finding this kind of confusing.
Yeah.
But I do like those two together as like a pairing. I think they work pretty well. I think more so in the second one than in the first one. The first one was just sort of, again, it was kind of like a resetting of what their relationship dynamic kind of is. And I did like the shot where they're having their heart to heart in the hallway, and there's a giant head trying to eat the ship outside. That was pretty good.
I mean,
to
tie it into the second one though, did you feel? Spoilers for the end of the second one. Was it like when Boimler comes back? I didn't feel anything there, and I don't know if the show is I don't think the show is trying to make me feel something, but I just think that the characters of this kind of stuff, even in comedies that are super rapid, joke a minute, kind of joke a second, kind of sitcom stuff, you generally need to have some kind of relationship to the characters. And I think that this show, one of its worst traits is that it's by far the best modern Trek show, but it does have the pacing of the modern Trek series, which is that it just blasts through stuff really, really quickly. And it works better for comedy than it does for drama. But at the same time, are you concerned about the character development? Like the characters at this stage, do you feel that there should be more, or do you think that this is what the show wants? Do you think that it matters? Is it relevant? If it's funnier, would it matter?
I think it's tough to call in the first two episodes, because if I remember correctly, our trajectory on the first season was kind of similar, and then by the end of the season we were like, oh, they actually told a pretty good story across the season. I think the question is whether or not they can do the same thing without just repeating all the character beats, you know?
Yeah. But shouldn't I have absorbed something from the first season, I guess would be my problem. Like, shouldn't I have residual feeling for these characters, or is it just that we're watching too much Star Trek and I'm forgetting about it? You know?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because like I think traditionally what a first episode, that this first episode, the way they set it up, would be more about Mariner's issues with Boimler leaving, right? Because that's how they open the season, is with her doing cardio in the holodeck, which I thought was pretty good. I like that too. And it's all her working through her anger at Boimler, the fact that he ditched her.
Yep.
But then you get into this other story, and that stuff doesn't play into it at all. Like the focus shifts to Mariner and her mom, and you're not getting at the end of that episode any sort of emotional through line for Mariner from where you started. Like Rick and Morty is fantastic at doing that, where they will set something up at the beginning and that becomes like the thesis of the episode.
Right.
And you've got all this crazy shit going on around it, but at the center is still this simple emotional arc that they're dealing with, that they hit the points they have to hit, and by the end it either breaks your heart or makes you feel good or makes you laugh at how cynical it is.
Yeah. I'd argue the core of good writing, basically. Like,
yes.
I think,
absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, the first episode in particular, I think both of them are missing this a little bit, because like you're saying, Boimler coming back doesn't really have that impact because they just sort of pay lip service to it. The second one does a little bit more with it, where they've got a replacement character for them to kind of compare and contrast with. But even so, it's just sort of surface level stuff. That's not really the point of the episode. And I like the second one a lot. I also like the second one more. I do think also that one, the focus is a little bit off, because I was kind of wondering why it was called Kayshon His Eyes Open when he's only in it for like, he turns into a doll after about a quarter of the episode.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of hoping that it was going to be more about them acclimating to him than this other character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in the first one, definitely that's what's missing is like the sense that Boimler has left a hole in this group is just kind of paid lip service to. And you don't get that much insight into how any of them. I guess the only one that you're really that you really should get insight to is Mariner. And like I said, it doesn't really affect much of the episode other than, they have that bit where they use his bed as a storage locker or whatever. But like as they're going through the craziness of the plot, there's no point where she's like comes to a conclusion based on something she thinks he would do, or goes to turn to him to say something and he's not there or anything like that. None of that stuff where it shows how much, even though she's playing it really cool, how much she actually misses him being there.
Yeah, it is surprising. I think that like Boimler's only in this at the very end. He's kind of the tag joke. You see him on the Titan as they get sucked into some kind of wormhole or something, and Riker is there. Well, I have more to say about Riker with the second one, which I guess we can move into at this point, because I think that
I do want to say one thing before we do that is on the canon thing. I think any argument about whether or not this is canon is possibly the biggest waste of time in your life I can think of.
Sure,
because it's like it's just.
We debated it too. No, I'm not saying like we're not above it, but it's like
but like it's I don't think it's meant to be digested in that. I think it is meant to be digested more in the way that you're talking about, where it's like it's kind of like a fun. They're having fun with the toys, Yeah. It's they're playing by canon rules to some extent, but like unless I would give them a lot of credit if they did this, because it would be one thing to look forward to in the second season of Picard. But if like Captain Mariner shows up in Picard, then we can talk about whether or not Lower Decks is canon. But until now, until that happens, it's like, it takes place in canon, but whether or not it actually goes on the list of like the history of Starfleet as told through the shows labeled Star Trek, I think is, I don't know, kind of a silly argument to have.
I think you could make the sense of, in the second episode in particular, if this is canon, this is some of the worst writing for Riker that's possible, right? Like, not to say that he's not funny, but to say that why is he talking this way? So, like, why is everything a musical reference and stuff like that? So it does exist in this weird world where it's technically canon, but it's not the universe that you accept to be Star Trek at the same time.
Right. Right.
And with the second one leading into
that's the same reason I don't understand why people get mad at like the amount of like Easter eggs and references they use, because like that's the point of the show is to have fun with the toys. So when you go to the collector's place, you're going to see Khan's necklace and that giant like sucker face monster guy and the bones of giant Spock or whatever the hell that thing is. That's just what you're going to do. It's just having fun.
Archer's water polo ball is in one of the shots.
Is it? Oh, I missed that. Oh, that's a good one. That's a deep cut.
That's a deep cut. Yep. The second one, Kayshon His Eyes Open, I think is what it's called. I'll skip ahead to that page to make sure. Kayshon His Eyes Open. This to me is the highs and the lows of how the comedy works on this show, and they did it in one episode, which I thought was fascinating. The Kayshon character is probably the worst referential, unfunny, is this even a joke, what you're doing, or are you just referencing the fact that there are weird aliens that talk this way in a previous episode of Star Trek, right? I was shocked with the title of the episode how little this character does and how little the characterization of those aliens came into anything that happened in the episode. He has no impact whatsoever on anything. He makes a couple jokes about speaking their kind of language thing, the whole screwy metaphor stuff, and he goes, "Oh, excuse me, my translator's not working. What I meant to say is I'd love to go to get breakfast," or whatever. Right. On the other hand, the way that they get Boimler back is brilliant. I think it's like
Yeah.
the best use of how you reference previous Star Trek stuff in a way that makes sense on this show, and it actually adds a little bit of a twist where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of cute and funny, and it actually means something for the universe. Where Boimler does the second chances thing and makes a clone of himself, and then they can keep a clone on the Titan and send a clone back to the Cerritos. I don't know. I was so torn because I hated the Kayshon stuff, but I was like, it was all worth it for that joke at the end. Did you have any thoughts about either one of the Kayshon or second chances ripoff?
Yeah, I had higher hopes for Kayshon when they introduced him because I thought that was an interesting addition to Starfleet that they've never done before. And I think I do think, unfortunately, it's a fairly one-note joke where it's just, yeah, Shaka when the walls fell is really the only funny thing you're going to get out of it. At least that's the only thing they got out of it. And then they turn him into a puppet for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Boimler stuff was great. I also, and I'm not the first person to say this, but I am shocked that they managed to do such a scathing indictment of the Alex Kurtzman era Star Trek on an Alex Kurtzman produced Star Trek show.
I was wondering, is that intention? Like, I was wondering about that. Like, you're talking about the references to like over militarization action sequences, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That Boimler calls out the crew of the Titan for not being Starfleet because they're not doing any exploring. Is there intent there, or is that just a lucky coincidence that it's aligned?
I think it's intent. I think it's intent because the one of the other crew members, one of the more badass crew members, has a line at the end that is very much one of those like overly specific kind of referential lines where it's like she says something like, maybe Starfleet isn't supposed to be about getting into crazy battles and having these overly complicated characters that rush through all of their plots, or like one of those kind of things. And it's like that feels very specific. That's not just accidentally backing into making a point. I think they were very specifically setting, and like the contrast to that is Boimler talking about how much it's basically every online argument that's ever been had in the last 5 years, where someone's like, why can't it just be like what it was like on the Enterprise D when people just played music and there was 5 daycare centers. So it's like, I mean, it seems like it's a pretty clear critique of what the modern version of Star Trek tends to be. Yeah.
I was curious about it. I wondered about the intent because, as you say, it's a Kurtzman run thing, and it feels a little bit. It doesn't feel like charmingly jokey about it. It feels more of like a scathing indictment of it in a weird way. Like the joke is very critical of that kind of storytelling, and
even Riker kind of acknowledges the fact that he's not in a situation that is natural to him at the end.
Yeah,
he wants to go back. I wish I was back on the D too.
Yeah, I wish I was back on the Enterprise D. Yeah,
and
like it. I think you could argue, you could even sort of massage this joke into talking about Enterprise, because I think Enterprise suffers from an action-itis thing of its own era that Discovery and Picard kind of amp up to a whole new level. But I was the only thing that makes it feel like it's like the pot calling the kettle black is that Lower Decks is not the show that does exploration, you know? So it's it's hard for Lower Deck. I was thinking this would be a really scathing indictment if Strange New Worlds had an episode that focused on this.
Right.
And it was like laid back, and it was like, you know, Pike is just like, we don't fucking run around on this show. We talk about diplomacy. And that would have felt funny. That would have felt better to me. That was the only reason why I thought that maybe there wasn't intent, is because Lower Decks is not the show to push that button. It's not the one to say, like, this is the way that you're supposed to do Star Trek. You're supposed to be slow and boring, because Lower Decks is not slow and about exploration at all, really.
It's not, but it does have, at least from the first season, the takeaway was that it does feel like it is the most traditional Star Trek show.
It does. It has plots it has plots running on Nitro that feel like original Star Trek plots.
Yeah. I think it's definitely dialed up but I think the bones are still there of the classic show. Because I do. I mean, I guess you could possibly say it's a bit of a self-deprecating comment to make, because what they're talking about is kind of what they do on Lower Decks, where it's a lot of running around and run and gun kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it speaks more to the other shows than it does to Lower Decks specifically.
I was glad they did it, if only for an in-episode explanation, because I was watching it going like, why? I understand this is a comedy, but like, why is Riker this way? It seems very strange. And then you get this understanding that the Titan is just a different culture of ship, and it's not that, like early on before they draw this conclusion, it makes it seem like Boimler is in a situation where he expects there to be less action. Like he expects kind of an Enterprise D type service thing, and there's much more action than that. And Riker is always standing up and pointing and yelling at things and making references. So I felt that it was worthwhile to do, just because within the episode itself you can explain why Riker is this way at this point, and why the crew of the Titan acts that way and pay it off and stuff like that. So I was happy they did it. What did you think of Riker's appearances in this?
I think he's great. I mean, I'm always gonna clap for Frakes showing up in this stuff.
I like that when he's talking to the clone who's staying behind, and he's like, as the door is shutting, he says like computer play. What is it? He says like play like Bluebird or something like that. It's a jazz standard. Just a jazz standard as he's pouring a drink.
I mean, it's like that. I think that depiction of Riker tracks with what this show does, which is it takes those things about the franchise that are kind of quirky, and it just dials them up to 11. So the Lower Decks version of Riker, of course, is going to be, he's super into jazz. It's not just that one time he played a trombone on the show. Right, yeah. It's like he does it all the time.
It makes references to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's constantly blowing stuff up and yelling red alert and stuff like that. It makes sense to me that that's the way that he would be on the show.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see what they do with other characters who show up, if they do show up.
Yeah,
like I'd be interested to see what
Tom Paris
Lower
is in
Decks.
the next episode. We haven't done Voyager yet, so
Tom Paris is excellent. I didn't know that. Okay,
we won't have a frame of reference, but he is in the next one.
Yeah, but like, what does Lower Decks Data look like? Is he constantly dealing with his emotion chip, and it's like Mr. Tricorder on acid for 30 minutes?
I think Worf would be actually tough to do, because I think that the Worf parody would feel too Lower Decky. Like, there's not a distinction from what Worf is to exaggerate within this series.
I think what you end up doing with Worf is you just show him destroying people.
Yeah,
I think he just
the ultra violence that they couldn't show on TNG type stuff.
Yeah. Or if they had Worf on the show and didn't make some direct joke or comment about the time he killed a kid while he was playing soccer, I think they would be not doing their job correctly.
Yeah. In terms of so the Collector is the main storyline in Kayshon, where they find this ship that they have to go over, and they get a chance to draw all the callbacks and stuff like that. They have a couple jokes about it. A little bit let down that there's not more meta commentary on Star Trek collecting or something like that. Like, I feel that that's an area that they could have really gone into. I was just thinking the SNL Star Trek convention sketch where Shatner does the thing. He's like, "What's with you people? Like, get a grip!
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?" I was expecting a little bit more commentary there, but the Squid guy is just your sort of generic, like, mobstery sleazebag guy. There's nothing really meta about him. He's just kind of a stock usual character. Anything about that?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised they didn't do more with it. Like, even that whole story that they were telling in there felt a little bit unfocused. Like, I got what they were doing, and I like where it ended up, but it was, I don't know. I wasn't totally sold on the competition angle between Mariner and what's his name, Stevie Hugbuns?
Manhaver, I think. Jet Manhaver.
Jet Manhaver. That's two Jets in the Star Trek universe. We got Jet Reno and Jet Manhaver.
Yep.
Yeah, I wish that they had done something a little bit more interesting in there.
I wish he was a better character. I think he's.
Yeah,
I don't think he was written well enough to. He's kind of the stick in the mud character, but then his development is that he just reveals that he's like, yeah, I like to laugh at the senior officers too, and
Right, yeah.
I didn't think the pathos of him being rejected at the end was strong enough for the reasons that I felt it was weird when Boimler comes back to have this character who we only just met and I'm not particularly interested be actually devastated that he can't be part of the group. You know, it just.
I will say, my girlfriend was very upset when they rejected him at the end. She was.
Yeah.
What she audibly went, no. So I guess
Maybe
it kind of
me.
works.
Yeah, maybe it's just me. Maybe that's not the last of Jet Manhaver that we've seen. I don't know. I mean, because Mariner always runs into those regulation characters, and it's always he always overcomes them somehow. I don't know how you would make him distinct and interesting in any way that they haven't done before. I wish he was more. I wish there was more of a. It almost feels I can't think of an episode of Seinfeld where that would happen, but where like a character is replaced by somebody and they are kind of enamored with the replacement. Like there's upgrades to him that he's better than Boimler in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. And again, I just think it's the way that the show works, and it might be a reason why I can never really love it, is that it doesn't. It's built and fueled by reference gags. Like the plot can be strong, but what fuels the comedy is a sense of referencing Star Trek, and it's not how are these characters interacting in a way that you could strip all the Star Trek crap off of it and it would still be funny. You know, they don't.
Well, I don't know. I think this episode still works. Well, obviously the Boimler aspect storyline kind of is fairly Star Trek connected, but like I don't think I think if they had just been in a generic collection room, I think that story still plays out the same way.
I think it would too, but I don't think it's interesting. I don't think that the conflict between Manhaver and Mariner is an interesting conflict. Where if it was extremely character oriented, I could say you could have these be generic non-Star Trek characters, and this is a funny concept about replacing your friend, you know. But that's not what the show does.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
I don't know why
I did like. Yeah, well, I had thought about that, but I did like that the collector room. They didn't really bring a lot of attention to stuff. Like it's the I remember when I watched Ready Player One. You know, I had heard everybody complaining about how it was just nostalgia, dopamine, and stuff. But the thing that I actually appreciated about it was they don't really call out anything. It's just kind of there.
Yeah. And
somehow for me that made it better because it's not about like pointing things out so much as it's just like, well, that's the universe they're in. And I thought this collector's room did a fairly good job of that, where it was just sort of letting that stuff be part of the environment. Like when they go in, when they find that giant Starfleet, is it what? I know it's from the cartoon, but what is that giant Starfleet skeleton guy? With the blue. I know it's from the TOS cartoon, but I don't know the context.
Yeah, it would be what's it, the one that? Am I wrong? Is it the Apollo episode where the guy gets big? It might be something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not going to embarrass myself by guessing.
Yeah.
But I
well, regardless, it kind of serves my point, which is like it doesn't matter if you know what that is.
Yeah.
It still becomes a obstacle for them to get through because it falls from the ground and breaks up into a bunch of giant pieces, and you know it's not something that they call out and they're like, oh look, it's the guy from who blah blah blah. Sometimes they do that, but I was impressed that they didn't do that much at all in this. And the one thing they do really call out is something that is, as far as I know, new to the universe, unless there is an episode of Deep Space Nine where Kalus's fornication helmet shows up.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing they use that seems to be a new thing, so it's not leaning too heavily into weaponized nostalgia.
Yes. Just got to know who Kalos is, I guess, for that one. I would agree there. The collector aspect is not explicitly called out as look at all these Star Trek references we can do, but I think that I think it does come back to what I talked about earlier, which is that the biggest failure of a joke, which is Kayshon, is just a reference to something. Like if you if you are not aware of that reference, there's no joke in that situation whatsoever. I'd hesitate to call it a joke because it's just a reference that people go, wow, that's cute. Like, I can't believe that happened. But if you were unfamiliar with Star Trek, you'd go, what's even happening with this guy? Like, what is he doing?
Yeah, I think that one is difficult because the context that you need to even understand what he's saying is not given. Yep. So, like saying the universal translator is broken or whatever is fine, but like I'm familiar with that episode, and even I was not entirely sure what the hell he was saying from time to time.
Yeah,
and so I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's the Darmok stuff, but it's not really landing with me because I'm not really sure what it is in that one note joke. And yeah, if you've never seen that episode, then I can't imagine that was anything more than just like, oh, I guess this is a different language, I guess.
Yeah, or the universal translator is jarbling his words. There's nothing beyond, is this a joke that the translator is not working? It's not even a weird, like, if you thought that was the case, you'd be surprised that it's not like a sort of like Tourette's-esque thing where the character's just swearing or something, while the translator is broken and busted, and there's a comedy with the stuff that he's saying. They don't play what he says for comedy. There's no...
Right.
I was thinking, like, because I knew this guy was coming up, I was just thinking that there must be a whole lot of, like, if you bring in a senior officer who talks like this, imagine this guy giving orders to people who don't know what he's talking about, and you're like, wow, there must be a whole sequence of stuff that you could build off of this, like misunderstandings, and what he's talking about is not, like, galore, the warp core needs fixing or something. The guy's like, what's wrong with the warp core? But it's just a reference to some other thing. He's like, come over for dinner or whatever, how their metaphor language works. They didn't do anything of that. It really, honestly, just made me appreciate how much work went into the original Darmok episode, because that still holds up so well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, imagine just take out whatever what's their language called? Well, it doesn't matter.
Take the Tamarians, I guess.
Tamarians. Take out that language and replace it with like Swahili or something. French, Italian. Yeah. I mean, pick a language that you yourself don't know.
Right.
It's like, does it make it funny then? No. It's just oh yeah, okay, yeah. Every now and then he's saying something, merci or sacre bleu or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do think there was a lot of potential there. The thing that I would have expected them to do in this kind of
continuing
show,
too. He must continue on in the show, and they might.
Yeah, maybe we'll get more of him later. I would hope so, given the way that he was just kind of like brushed to the side.
Oh, that's true. What happens to him at the end of the episode? He's in the sick bay, right?
He comes back in the background, so he's the puppet in the sick bay. And then they cut over to 10 forward or whatever.
Oh, that's right. The bar scene.
They're all talking.
He walks in the door. Yeah.
And then they have the little beat at the end where he tries to hit on the girl, but he's doing it through the Darmok language there.
Yeah, that's right.
Which that could be kind of funny, but again, it's not really. They don't really do anything with it. But what I was kind of expecting from this show, because I was like, why the puppet thing? They're talking about collectors. They turn him into a puppet, and the only thing I could think of is they're going to start selling puppets of this guy if they're not already available.
Yep.
And I was thinking, well, if this show was a little bit more, how in this episode about collecting and the insanity over collecting, do you not do one of those like fake commercials for get your own Kayshon puppet at lower, it's that sort of over the top crazy thing, commercial kind of thing for the great new digestible product that they have to sell you.
Yep.
And they didn't. It was just unless they were somewhere else, not on the show. But that was the only thing I think is like the only reason they're doing this is because they're gonna make a toy out of this.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like And the toy aspect fits into the collector universe. He becomes the toy, but the collector doesn't. Does the collector comment on it? He tries to take it. No, he tries to take him before he's a puppet, doesn't he? He tries to do something. Or does
they set off the alarm, and the alarm system says, since you set the alarm off, you're going to become part of the collection.
Okay.
And he blasts Kayshon, and the blast turns him into a puppet. That's it.
Gotcha.
There's no further exploration of what that means. It's just something that happens.
No deep ethical thing about how we're all commodities to somebody else and stuff like that.
There's not even a line where like Mariner grabs him and goes, "Oh my God, he's so cute! I want one of these. Can I make another one?" Like there's nothing like that. Like, oh, I can understand why he would want to collect this. This thing is adorable. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of it's truly baffling as to why they did that.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, he's 1 out of 1,000. I got number 1. That's got to be worth something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll move to final thoughts at this point.
I did. The one joke that I did like that is a reference you have to know is when they get there, the squid guy says they were like, "Sorry, we were late," and he says something like, "Would you get held up debating the ethics of a humanoid robot or something like that?"
Yeah.
The humanity of a robot. I liked that one.
We'll go to final thoughts. Thank you everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed the content today where we talked about Kayshon His Eyes Open and strange energies. You can want to, if you want to support the show, you want to hear more content like this, and you want to hear more content in general, you go to patreon.com/thepenskypal. Support us there, a couple dollars a month. You get extra podcasts. You get polls to decide what we talk about. You get access to the Discord channels that aren't available to everybody. All that good stuff. And you keep supporting the show. You make sure that we do everything in Voyager, which we're at that goal now, but it's always nice to secure that by adding a few more dollars to make sure that if someone drops out, we don't stop doing it. And we're going to be covering every episode of Voyager at some point, all thanks to the patrons. So patreon.com/thepenskyfile is the best way to support the show. And as always, a special thank you to our captains tier supporters. Special thanks to Tark Latif, Samuel Custer, Joint Mango, Cal Barrett, Mike Burnett, Andrew Charlog, Matthew Ross, Michael Pond, Christian Pouch, Matt Cutler, Nick Sergey, Grim Santo, Sean, Bradley Killens, Brandon Howells, Dwayne Hackett, Vault 13 Hero, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Owens, Stephen Minton, HH28, Darth Mosk, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Poindexter G, Patrick Seba, Dave Davies, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric Sandstrom, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Nick the Rat, Disbretta, Edmark Star, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivia Pardua, Garoppolo, John Zorn, Retail, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunter, ZWNF Remixes, Captain Munchausen, James McLennan, Beal, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die, Dennis Seifert, Chris McLaughlin, and Mutilated Puppet. Thank you very much, everybody, for supporting the show. Let us know what you thought about the 2 first episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks. We're not rating these at this point. I don't think we need to, really. I'm not going to start that now because we didn't rate the first season. But we don't have any comments from the patrons because we're doing this as they come out. So it's a little bit of a shorter episode. But final thoughts, Clay, about the first... We don't have to read their terrible thoughts about these episodes. But no, patrons, leave your thoughts about the upcoming 4th season of Enterprise. We're a couple episodes in, so if you want to leave some thoughts now, I recommend that you do that. Final thoughts about this one, Clay? Any final thoughts about these first 2 episodes? And I don't think I have a better lead for you at that, unfortunately. I was hoping I could give you a direction to go in, but do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. I thought it was a pretty good start. It was pretty consistent with the last season. I think it doesn't. The first 2 for me didn't hit the heights of the last season, but it took them a while to get there in that season anyway. But I did think that the second episode was one half of it I thought was really good, and the other half I thought was fine. And yeah, I'm interested to see what the rest of it. Like, it hasn't soured me on the show or anything. It's not like it's any more or less than the last season was, and I enjoyed the last season. So I envision myself enjoying this one unless it gets too in the weeds of its own for its own good.
Yeah, I like this show. I don't hesitate to watch it, really.
Sure.
It's not like I'm like, oh, God damn it. I have to watch, like, at the end of every Discovery season, I'm like, oh, fuck, I have to watch, like, an episode of Discovery. I don't feel that way about Lower Decks, really. But to call back to what I said before, I do really just have the sense of this is a web series that I'm watching. Like, this is not authentic in a lot of ways. Like, I think discussing it on the podcast is kind of an example of how it feels that way, and why I'm glad that we're not doing them episode by episode is because under the core of what it is doing, there's not a lot there. Like, and say what you want about Enterprise being a failure and Enterprise being kind of mediocre and not very interesting. There is an attempt under the surface of everything with Enterprise to try to do something. Like, they're trying, but they're not very good at what they're trying to do. Lower Decks doesn't really do that, and it's not the fault of the show, because I don't think the show is trying to do that. But that's what leads things like the line about Star Trek isn't about action, it's about exploration. It makes it ring a little bit hollow to me. It's like, well, you're not the show to lecture me about this, really. But I don't dislike it. I just don't. It's the best of the new Treks, and I don't really know if I would recommend anyone watch the show. You know, I wouldn't be like, you should check out Lower Decks. That's a good show right there. It's just in a weird place for me, where I think it's doing well against its competition, but if there was another even average Star Trek show, this would not be in that pole position place. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think it's a tough one to recommend for someone who's not a Star Trek fan, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think it's, I wouldn't say, oh man, you got to watch Lower Decks. Even if you are a Star Trek fan, I probably wouldn't say that. But
yeah,
I don't think. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's not something I like the show. I enjoy watching it. But yeah, is it? Yeah, that's it.
I mean, yeah. Does it, like? I don't know.
I think it has potential. I think it has potential because I think the highs of last season were higher than I expected it to go. Like, I think they told some really good stories towards the end, and I think if they harnessed more of that energy and managed to tell these, well-crafted stories that also exist in this wacky, fast-paced world, then I think it could become a show where I'm like, you should probably watch Lower Decks. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But as it stands, it's like, it's fine. Check it out. It's good for a half an hour. And laugh about.
It's not even really a criticism, because it's not failing at what it's trying to do. Right. I can't be like, this show is not executing itself. It's executing what it's trying to do. And in a marketplace of you're just trying to flood Paramount Plus with content that people will watch, it's doing a serviceable job at that.
Yeah. I think if the stories were worse and it was just running around referencing stuff, then I think it's in trouble. But it's not that. I think they've even these two stories, which are, the first one is fine, the second one's a bit better. I think there's enough to hang that stuff on that it doesn't just get incessant and loud, to me anyway.
Yeah. I'd agree. So I'm looking forward to the next two. We'll have the next two episodes after the next Enterprise episode, which I think is the wrap-up, Season 3 wrap-up after this one. So, and then we're going to move into 0 Hour and Home and everything after that, alternating with Lower Decks, obviously. And the next two, I don't know what they are. I think the Tom Paris one is next, and I don't know what's after that, so I won't bother looking at it. But thank you very much for listening, everybody. Support the show at patreon.com/thepensky File if you're so inclined. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
Keep checking out Rotten Horror Picture Show and Badass. Rotten Horror Picture Show, we've got American Werewolf in London and The Invitation.
Yeah.
That are coming out or out yesterday. At this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Those are fun ones. And Badass, we're coming up on the end of the season, which is the end of the series, actually. We've only got, I think, 3 episodes of our show left before we're done with the entirety of Batman the Animated Series. And on Patreon, we're still trucking our way through the Friday the 13th series. This month is Jason Takes Manhattan, and next month is Jason Goes to Hell.
Look forward to that
which
on Patreon.
He technically kind of does. I guess that's a little misleading, but
I can't believe it's almost been a year of that at this point. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it feels like
9 months in.
9 months in, the baby is born.
Yeah, I'd name it
that's
Jason. There's not enough Jasons
you.
in the world anymore.
That's it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts about Lower Decks. You can send an email, do it on social media, comments on the YouTube video. We are done with this one. We'll be back with the Enterprise. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time.